Hi, hello. Before I get into the actual content of the YouTube video, I'm gonna give you some brief information because this is my first ever video on YouTube. Hi, my name is Spencer. I use he, they pronouns. I'm currently going for my bachelor's degree in art with an emphasis on painting, and I minor in art history. So today I'm going to be talking about a lot about art history and some about art as well. I hope you enjoy. And maybe like and subscribe, if you like it. The internet has a weird phenomena of just guys on Twitter with ancient Greek and Roman statues as their profile pictures, giving the most interesting, if you want to call it that, opinions of all time. And I'm going to be talking about one specific opinion that a lot of people, not just weirdos on Twitter, share, and it's the idea that modern art is bad inherently. So if you have this opinion, don't be mad, don't get off, don't leave a hate comment, don't call me a slur or anything like that. Relax, I'm not here to attack you at all. In fact, I wanted to discuss why we think that modern art is bad and also give some context to a specific thing that we are going to be talking about. So a couple weeks ago, maybe like a month ago almost, on Twitter, there was an account that was sharing this specific meme. And I just want to describe why we dislike modern art and use this meme as sort of a template. So I'm going to be breaking down this video into two specific parts, discussing education and the artworks themselves and the movements that are tied to them, and also bringing it back into, why we hate modern art at the end. So starting off with education, let's start with Leonardo and the Renaissance. The Renaissance was a period of time between 1350 and 1580 that was largely characterized by humanism and classical studies, specifically studies of ancient Greece and Rome. It was also characterized largely by religious art because it was based in Italy, and it included artists such as Donatello, Titian, Leonardo, of course, Raphael, and many others. Today, when we think about artists, I'm going to bring it back to the Renaissance, don't worry. But when we think about artists, people usually think of someone kind of like me. Pronouns, pink hair, not going to do anything with their degree, probably going to be like a manager at McDonald's someday, but that's about it. Well, when people thought about artists in the Renaissance, it was very different. Artists were actually seen as manual laborers, in a sense. They were part of the Apothecaries Guild, and part of the reason for that is because they would have to mix their own pigments, and they'd have to, put the paint on themselves and work with the chisel all on their own, and it was seen as a very physical thing, if something that heavily involved physical labor, and therefore it wasn't seen as an academic thing. It was more so seen as something that you did with your hands, and you did it if you had a specific set of skills. So Leonardo, yes, the meme is correct in the fact that Leonardo did not obtain an art degree, but that's because it wasn't really a thing for artists, because artists weren't seen as academics at the time. In fact, the Renaissance is what starts the major shift of artists being like, hey, we're academics, we want to be seen as smart academic people, not just laborers. So Leonardo da Vinci was born in 1452, and he began studying as an apprentice at the age of 15. He continued to be an apprentice until 1477, when he finally became his own artist, in a sense. He finally wasn't an apprentice anymore. He was someone who could actually be commissioned to create art for others, and he did often, which is where we get the painting that we're going to be talking about today, the Mona Lisa. But that being said, Leonardo spent many years studying under people, and he spent many years honing his craft and working and sketching, drawing. He spent a lot of time focusing on art. So to imply that he didn't obtain a degree or that he didn't go to school is pretty misleading. He didn't technically go to a real college or anything. He was a part of a painters guild. And he did study underneath people as a student, but he didn't attend to a college or institution because, again, art was not seen as an academic thing. So yes, he did study art, but he didn't obtain a degree or anything because it wasn't really a thing. It wasn't really possible for him. So to say that he created this great work despite not having a degree is a little misleading. He still did spend many years studying art. Moving on to Van Gogh. Van Gogh fits a little bit more into what these people are trying to say. Van Gogh only attended college for about 9 months, and he didn't really start painting until much later on in his life. However, it's still a little bit misleading to imply that, you know, he didn't get a degree, therefore he had no education, therefore he made this great art without having any education. He was an art dealer for about 6 or 7 years, and he was around paintings all the time. You know, even when he decided to create art, it's not like he just like threw stuff on a board and called it good. He spent a lot of time sketching and studying the world around him and deciding what he was going to draw and what he was going to create. So to imply that just because he didn't go to school, or that because he didn't obtain a formal degree or education it's again very misleading. Just because you don't necessarily go to school for art doesn't mean that you don't spend an immense amount of time studying art and looking into what you're going to be making. Hi, so I don't have a camera and I'm filming this on my phone currently, and my phone ended up dying last night in the process of filming the second half of the video. So I'm here the next day in the morning at like 9 o'clock for some reason to finish out this video before I have to go to class. So I already briefly touched on the Renaissance and the type of art that would be made in the Renaissance, but now I'm going to be talking specifically about the Mona Lisa. The Mona Lisa was completed in 1503, and it was a relatively well-known painting because, I mean, Leonardo did create it, but it didn't have the worldwide recognition that it has today until it was stolen and missing for 2 years in 1911. Now, that's not to say that it wasn't known at all. In fact, it was pretty influential at the time. Raphael used the painting as inspiration for several of his pieces, including A Young Woman with Unicorn. But it really didn't gain the recognition that we all see it, you know, like, it's the Mona Lisa, it's such a work of art. We didn't really have that exact opinion about it until it was stolen and became world famous because it has this historical context and scandal around it. I'm not going to go super in depth about it, but basically the man who stole the Mona Lisa stole it because it was originally stolen by Napoleon, and he sort of, you know, he had this idea that like, the Mona Lisa has to go back to its home country, so I'm going to take it and it'll be in my apartment for 2 years, and then I'm going to try and sell it to a gallery. And the guy at the gallery was like, what are you doing? This is the Mona Lisa. Like, you have to give it back. But yeah, that's just to say that like, it wasn't as infamous as it is now, if that makes sense. Like, it isn't as well known, or it wasn't as well known until it got stolen. Moving on with Impressionism and Post-Impressionism and Van Gogh's Starry Night. So this one takes place much closer to our current time. This is like the late 1800s, and it's an incredibly significant point in history because this is a point in time when artists started to sort of rebel against the status quo. The status quo for a very long time had been French academic painting, a lot of paintings that were very smooth and idealized and just very they weren't very like controversial, you know. They depicted like upper class women or upper class men doing upper class things, and it's very idealized and it's very pretty. But these people, the Impressionist painters and the Post-Impressionist painters, wanted to paint middle class ideas, and they wanted to experiment with light and shadow, and they wanted to create something entirely new. One thing that is also significant is that they wanted to make it clear that there was paint on this painting. Meaning that like, they didn't want it to be super smooth and idealized and realistic. They wanted it to look like a painting, which a lot of people hated. It was not liked by any means. It was considered to be garbage. In fact, the term impressionist comes as an insult because they claimed, critics would claim that it's just a impression of real life. And then Impressionist artists started to claim it as their own, and they're like, no, actually, Impressionism is good, and we're going to use that term and claim it as our own, and we're going to keep painting like this. So Post-Impressionism is it's in terms of art style, which is what I'm generally talking about here, it's very similar, like a lot of like broad brush strokes, experiments with lighting and shading and things like that, and color. So I'm not really going to delve into that at all, but I want to make it very clear that Van Gogh was not an Impressionist painter, but a Post-Impressionist painter. Speaking about Vincent van Gogh himself, he absolutely, like many of the other Impressionist and Post-Impressionist painters, was not liked at all. People in general thought that he was a nuisance. His parents thought that he was a deviant. They gave up basically all financial responsibility for him and basically just pushed it all onto their younger son, Theo. An entire town signed a petition to have him locked up in an asylum because they just couldn't deal with him, basically. In fact, that's actually where we get the Starry Night from, is he painted it while he was in an asylum because people hated him and because he was very much so mentally ill. But, like, you know, asylums back then were not very kind to patients. But that's where we get the Starry Night from, is actually the view that he had from his window while he was in the asylum. So, all in all, Vincent van Gogh was not a very well-liked painter, and his paintings especially were not very well-liked at all. In fact, they weren't even really considered art until Impressionist and Post-Impressionist paintings started to gain notoriety, which was many years after Vincent was dead. I do want to make a very quick disclaimer before I get into my end point. I know that the meme that I'm talking about specifically and the argument that I'm talking about specifically that is presented through the meme is not saying that these artists or artworks were not initially, you know, it's not saying that they were initially influential, but they are influential now. And I understand that completely. However, the way that this is presented to someone who doesn't really know a lot about art, it seems like it's presenting this idea that, like, these artworks are famous and they were always famous. And, you know, these artworks aren't famous now. The bad artworks, they aren't famous now, which means that they're bad and that we shouldn't like them because they're new and bad. So again, I'm not talking crap or trying to insult anyone who is, you know, modern art bad. I'm not against that at all. In fact, Impressionism is actually technically modern art, but whatever. Like, when I speak about modern art, I'm speaking about, like, today, like, stuff that's been made within, like, the last 60 years or so. So, in case you need me to connect the dots, I don't blame you at all. What I'm trying to say here is that these artworks, the Mona Lisa and Starry Night, did not become as influential as they are today until they had many years pass and more historical significance was put onto them. They had more history tied to them, like being stolen or, you know, being tied to this very controversial movement. Good art is a general term that is used, and I personally hate that term because art is subjective just like anything else, and art is up to the opinion of the beholder. If you think a certain painting is bad, you're well within your right to think that. You know, there are certain paintings that were made hundreds of years ago that I think are absolute garbage, that I just don't like because the historical context around them just makes them kind of icky. Hi, so I'm editing, but I just wanted to expand further on my idea, or my opinion stated about what art is, like, good or bad. When I say that historical context can sometimes make an artwork better or worse, I'm specifically talking about, like, era, like what was happening at the time. A painting that seems pretty good is John Gast's American Progress. You know, overall it seems like a pretty okay painting, you know, like the brush work is nice, there's, you know, the colors are pretty, you know, but when you look at the painting and you really analyze what is happening and you look at what was going on at the time, this is like 1870s and the Manifest Destiny movement and, like, expanding westward and killing off the rest of the indigenous people and putting them into reservations. You know, it's not really great. It makes the painting, in my opinion, quite disgusting. I don't like that painting very much. That's just one example, though. There are plenty of others as well that might seem like bad paintings, but when you provide historical context, they actually are quite good. A good example of a artwork that appears bad but actually becomes good when you give historical context to it is Monet's, not Monet, Monet's Olympia. Monet was a sort of like in-between painter, sort of going into the Impressionist movement but not quite there yet. And his painting Olympia was regarded as being kind of garbage. But when you look at the historical context and what went into this painting is a copy or a alternative version of Titian's Venus. You can see several differences between the two paintings, including Monet's painting is rather shortened. It's very flat appearing. The Venus or Olympia seems to be very harshly outlined. In fact, the lighting on her is so strong as well that, like, part of her shading, you can't really see it very well. And with Venus's, you know, it's much softer, it looks more naturalistic. It's in that stylized way that a lot of people like with academic painting, even though I want to clarify it is a Renaissance painting, not a French academic painting. There's also several points in the painting that point to historical significance. One of them is the black woman who's shown just behind Olympia in the painting. She is an example of French colonialism and the fact that new people from all sorts of different places were coming to France at this point in time, and just the fact that France was engaging with a lot of different cultures and people, whether it was against their will or not. But this is just all to say that historical context can provide many different meanings to paintings, and we just need to allow enough time to pass for more historical context to be put onto modern art so that we can appreciate it, or who knows, maybe even hate it more. Yeah, back to the video. And that's all to say that loving art takes time. It takes time and appreciation and knowing and understanding in order to sort of, you know, construct these ideas of like, what was the artist thinking? What were they going through? What was the period that they were living in like? We need time to pass in order to truly analyze and appreciate the works that are being made today. This is also to say that I by no means am looking down on or talking bad about people who don't understand a lot about art history, because I understand that not everyone is interested in art history. But if you don't know a lot about art history, or you don't know a lot about certain art movements, you shouldn't talk about certain art movements as though you know about them, you know? If you don't know what the post-impressionist and impressionist movements were like, you shouldn't say, this work was so great, this work was so awesome. Because at the time, this work wasn't great, and it wasn't awesome, it was hated. To finish out this video with a Michael Craig Martin quote, "Art is like a sense of humor. If you don't have one, no amount of explanation is going to make you laugh." That being said, if you like this video, please feel free to subscribe and like and all that stuff. I'm gonna try and upload more, and eventually, you know, maybe if people like my videos or they like my content, maybe I can use this to potentially, you know, fund my college. Don't feel pressured to subscribe or anything like that either way. This is just also a fun thing that I'm doing on the side, so, you know, no worries at all. But if you did like, feel free to absolutely subscribe and do all that stuff. And I hope that you have a great day, and I hope that you enjoyed what I'm talking about. And if you have an alternative opinion, leave it down below. Just let me know. You know, I'm always here to educate myself. That's why I'm in school in the first place. Thank you.